Hey guys, Jake here from the Hook and Vise. I wanted to go over a tutorial with you guys of a recent tie that I did. It's going to be the Palomino Midge. This is a black variation of that fly. I've tied it about 4 or 5 times. I was looking for something new to do. Pretty limited materials. This is the actual fly here, a Palomino Midge. This is, like I said, the black variation. It's tied on a size 14 Partridge Nymph hook. All it really takes for materials is some Vernille, which is just a small diameter, stronger chenille type material. Some bucktail or calf tail for your thorax. I chose white in color here. And some Peacock Herl. And I'm going to be using a black thread. So kind of just wanted to walk you through this today. We'll go over it. Like I said, I've been using a size 14 for the hook. You can do anywhere from 14 to 18, depending on what your liking is. So we'll get this hook set in the vise and we'll get started. This fly can be tied in different variations of colors, just like any other fly really. The original comes with a olive tail with a white thorax and wing on the front with a Peacock Herl. So this is just a black variation of that. You can do white, red, whatever you want. So the thread that I'm using is a 70 Denier UTC thread. So we're going to start our thread here on the hook. Most of our material is going to be tied up here towards the front of the hook, midsection of the hook shank. We're going to leave that rear section of the hook shank open. And our first step is going to be to tie in that Vernille. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the end of this Vernille here, which is going to be the tail end that I'm not tying in, and I'm just going to strip off some of the end of that Vernille. And what that's going to do is expose almost like a little stinger on the end of that tail, as you can see there. So you can go anywhere really from 1.5 to 3 times the length of the hook shank. I've done these in a bunch of different lengths, but if you're looking to keep everything in proportion to the size hook you're using, I just go a little bit longer than what the hook shank size is. So once you get it to where you want it, just go ahead and capture that and tie it down. Make sure it's staying right on top of your hook shank. It's nice and centered. And then what I like to do is just kind of give it a little bit of a curl. Just try and get that upward bend to it. And then cut out your excess here. And what we're going to do is, I've just been using bucktail, so we'll take a little bit of bucktail. You don't need much, just a little bit of sparse bucktail, just so once we wrap our Peacock Herl down, it'll give us a nice thorax to fold this bucktail over onto. So like I said, you don't need much. It's a pretty small fly, so small hook. You're just going to tie in that bucktail. And then once we have that bucktail in, I'm going to go ahead and tie in a couple strands of just Peacock Herl. And that's going to build our thorax, which we're going to wrap that bucktail. We'll just fold that bucktail back over it once we're done tying it in. And some people might find that hackle pliers can be of assistance here, but I usually just wrap it with my fingers I find it's easier. So simple so far. Tied in our tail, our Vernille, we tied in our bucktail, and then our Peacock Herl. So we're going to work our thread back up towards the eye of the hook, and then we're just going to wrap this Peacock Herl, give ourselves a nice thorax here. You don't need much, just a couple strands just to kind of build up a nice little thorax. It'll give you a nice little shine at the front of this fly. Go ahead and capture your Peacock Herl once you're done. And just a couple tight wraps to cinch that down at the eye of the hook. Next step is to fold over this bucktail. So that's going to give us a nice back on this fly, a nice thorax. It'll cover that Peacock Herl very nicely. And once you get that pulled over, I usually pull it over with my dominant hand. That's just what's comfortable for me. And I'll capture the bucktail with my bobbin with my non-dominant hand. So couple of tight wraps, it'll flare that bucktail and it'll give you that nice little wing up in front of the fly. Just a little bit of downward tension and secure that bucktail in place. And then you can come up front, just lift that bucktail up like so, give it a snip. I like to go a little bit longer and then work my way back down to what I think looks good. So you're going to be taking off most of that bucktail. And it should flare up just a little bit like that. Just like that. Give you a nice little wing up front. Still allow you to get access to the hook eye to put your leader through. And then just a couple whip finishes here. A couple turns, and really all that's left here, you know, if you got to clean your fly up a little bit, go for it. But really all that's left is I put a little bit of UV glue under the tail where it meets the hook shank. That's going to keep your tail up. You want that little bit of upward curve to it. It's going to keep it in that position. And I also treat the back or the thorax, this white portion with the bucktail, is just for a little extra added strength. So I'm going to be using just a Loon Outdoors clear UV finish, just to kind of finish off the fly and give it some extra strength. So I'll do a little couple dabs of UV resin just on. I do the thorax and I'll do under the tail here just to keep that propped up. And I'll also put a little bit of a dab of UV on the tail end just to keep that Vernille from unraveling or possibly being damaged or getting more of that tail to come off if it's hit by a fish. So you can see that once that UV resin cures under there, that UV glue cures, that keeps that tail up nicely like that. So we'll hit that for a couple seconds, just make sure that's all dry. And then we'll just do the tail just to finish it all off. And when you do the thorax here, you just cover those bucktails with some UV glue. You just make sure to get your thread wraps too where you did your whip finish. And it's just all going to make sure that this fly holds up a lot better. So, and then we'll hit that with the UV. And that's it. That's the Palomino Midge. I'm pretty anxious to tie this and some other variations once I get some different materials and more colors, but that's really it. It just takes a few minutes. They're really easy to tie and don't require a heck of a lot of materials, so I enjoyed tying this. Again, this is a Palomino Midge, Peacock Herl, bucktail or calf tail, whatever you want, and a little bit of Vernille. So thanks for tuning in. Again, this is Jake with the Hook and Vise. Check us out on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. We're all over the place. So thanks for tuning in.